Hello, everyone. Welcome to the seminar today. I am so excited to see all of the people who are here. I'm reading all of your names and I even recognize a few. And I do want to encourage all of you to definitely make use of the chat feature today. It would be wonderful to have this, also more of kind of a conversation. So if anything really stands out to you or if you have a comment, of course, we'll do Q&A at the end, but feel free to communicate, to comment, to respond to each other in a respectful manner. And I'll be asking a few questions of you as well. So I think with that, we'll get started. And as Tracy said, I'll talk a little bit more about myself and my interest and experience in this as we continue to move through the presentation. So here's a little bit of what we're going to go over in the next hour. I'm going to start a little bit talking about the idea of good people versus bad management, and a little bit of my experience of how I got interested in this topic, and kind of what leads to the idea of what makes a good manager. And then we're going to move on to what is a people-centered approach to management. What is the definition? What does that actually look like? And then finally, we're going to move over to how to be a people-centered leader. We're going to go through some of the actual steps. And then what are some other steps you can take if you're interested in learning more about this style of leadership? And then finally, why is this, after looking at all of the different components that have being a people-centered leader entails, why is a people-centered approach to management a successful one, in my opinion? As you know, there are many different types, but this is one that I like, and this is the one that I feel kind of works best for my style. So now let's talk a little bit about good people versus bad management. So a little bit about my own story in terms of this area. When I was a very young person, starting off in the workforce, I entered into a very a nonprofit organization. It was kind of a startup. There was very few people in leadership. And it turned out to be kind of one of those places that had a lot of high turnover. And that had to do a lot with the management style, which was not taken seriously as part of making it a really strong organizational space. And what do I mean by not having good management for that type of space? So the leaders there would do things kind of show up at work anytime that they felt like it, although the rest of the staff would be there from 9 to 5. They might show up at 3, they might show up at 4:30. There was a lot of criticism without correction, without understanding what people's work was, without being able to provide certain amount of guidance. There was a lot of people feeling unseen there. People's names weren't remembered. People weren't treated with a great deal of respect. So that was kind of really my first entry into the workforce. And I didn't last there very long, but I thought, I feel like it had a lot to do with the way that the leadership was working there. So then I moved on directly to the exact opposite, a big corporate law firm where it had a really big HR department and management was taken very seriously. And I realized by kind of learning more from their HR department that there were all of these resources and that someone could really learn to be a good manager, that could really be a skill. And throughout the years, I have had different types of managers. Some were great, some were not so great. And then I've managed people at all levels, from middle management to senior leadership positions, from one person to 10 people. And so it's kind of my experience, but also my interest that led me to do a lot of research on this area. So I hope that some of the things that I've learned will be helpful to you. And so, again, kind of just to tell you a little bit about my story, the lessons that I took from that. What did I find throughout my experience did not work, right? So the idea of feeling unseen, the idea that people didn't know my name, people didn't know really who I was, people didn't even know the work that I was doing, so they couldn't really evaluate my value to the organization, having a lack of guidance. No one wants to really have a micromanager, but people want to have their work acknowledged, have direction. As I mentioned, there was criticism without correction. There was a lot of poor communication, which led to a work environment that was overall had an overall kind of toxic feel. And again, the lessons that I learned from that experience was that good people, there are good people who are just not skilled managers. And so I want to congratulate you all for being here and recognizing that management is something that can be improved upon, that can be learned. So there are people who just have not had that proper training, that might have the potential to be great managers, but don't really know what type of skills to use to be successful. And then, of course, I've also learned through my years, which some of you may have also learned, is that we do have to admit that there are people who are not fit to manage other people. And of course, those are people who might have personality disorders like narcissistic personalities, psychopathic or sociopathic personalities. So you'll see there are people who are not fit for management. Again, we might not be in the place to diagnose that, but not everyone is meant for that. But overall, people can learn these skills, which is one of the things that I am excited to talk to you about today, which is one method. And that's really how to use one form of management, which is a people-centered style of management. So now I want to get a little bit of engagement from you and ask the first question of the afternoon. And please feel free to put your thoughts in the chat if you feel comfortable sharing. The first question is, have you ever left a job or a position because of a specific manager or management style? And I want to give you a second to kind of put your thoughts in the chat if you feel comfortable. You can put as little or as much as you like. I'm already saying that yes, that many. Oh, okay. There's absolutely yes, absolutely yes. And feel free to expound upon if there is any very specific. Yeah, I see people leave managers, not jobs, and that is very true. And if there's anything, yes, but yeah, so I see something here. One was transactional, the other was punitive. Okay, yeah. And I see that, sometimes people may have been really, uh, into the work and excited about the work, but it was the management that was that was the issue. The management culture, the culture that was created. Yes, where time off desk was told that I need to get better at managing my time. So again, kind of criticizing without. Yeah, so good. The manager left first, and the management policies. Yeah, because you have to remember that the management is the person who a lot of times the the overall culture, sets the overall policies. So it's really important, and these are really great comments twice. Yeah, and sometimes it can, sometimes what's really we have to think about how important having good management is, because it really can impact someone's mental health, and that's something that can cause trauma that they can carry through other work situations. So I can see here that a lot of us have had that experience, and it could be that those are people who are not specifically suited for management at all, but also it could be that those are people who have not had the proper training and could have possibly had the potential to be good managers, but didn't really know. And I am continuing to see really interesting thoughts. And so the top 5 reasons why people lose jobs, or not lose jobs, why people leave jobs. And so I'd be interested to hear some of your thoughts on what you think some of the top reasons are. So I'm going to go ahead and show you all what the top 5 reasons are that people leave jobs. So this is from a survey that was taken from Flex Jobs. So the top 5 reasons are, of course, toxic company culture, which many of you have just mentioned in your comments. So that's 62%. Low salary, of course, 59%. Over half, 56%, used poor management as a reason. why they leave their jobs. Of course, lack of healthy work-life boundaries and not allowing remote work. And in my opinion, of course, as many of you have already noted, number one, toxic company culture and poor management kind of go hand in hand. So having a strong management, having, as we call here in my institution, management excellence, can really impact things like the retention rate and the performance of your company, of your organization, of your staff. So we've that was I think a good introduction to get into the topic of people centered approach to management. So, a people centered approach to management. And I do just want to note first, I have another question. I really want to get you all engaged because at the end of the day, so if you don't mind to continuing to participate, I do want to ask you if you just want to put in one word or a few words, kind of what skills do you believe are needed for a people centered approach to management? What do you think that would look like to you? Let's see. Empathy, yes. Active listening. You all maybe, I don't know, some of you might not even need this slideshow. Strong communication skills, including listening. I love that I keep saying empathy. You are on the right track. Compassion, listening skills, yes. Lack of snap judgments, patience and empathy, respecting, yes, yes. All of these, a dose of humility, whole person approach. Yeah, a lot of this we're going to start talking about in more detail. But you are absolutely on the right track, being a role model, at ability to admit to mistakes and apologize. So you all are absolutely on the right track. So I do want to say, because I only had such a short amount of time with you, there was one resource that I used to kind of go over all the different components, which I think is a really great resource from Harvard Business School, called Leadership Fitness: The Path to Developing Human-Centered Leaders Who Drive Employee Fulfillment. At the end, I'm going to give you all a really great list of free resources that you can use, but this one is a really good one to get started with on a people-centered approach to management. And but I'll give you some more resources at the end to continue to learn further. So I just wanted to put that up front, that this is one of my main resources here. So here's the definition, and some resources will call it a human-centered leadership approach. Some people will call it people-centered. I tend to go back and forth. So I took the definition that was developed by Harvard Business School and I broke it down, and then we're going to go into kind of the different components. So the very first line, not just a general people-first mindset, plus a particular set of soft skills. So I think that's really important to note, because I think when people say, oh, we're doing a human-centered approach, we're doing a people-centered approach, that's just being mindful of your staff, having soft skills, being personable. It takes more than that to be successful in this style of management. The second part, being a truly human centered leader, requires having a genuine intention to help each person succeed and find fulfillment at work. So, the key words here for me are intention. This has to be a style that you move through your organization with intention, intentionally trying to put the people first, and also finding fulfillment at work. So when you do a people-centered approach to a leadership, as we talk about, a lot of it is helping those who work with you and work for you find fulfillment in what they do, along with a disciplined approach to effectively choosing and exhibiting the leadership behaviors appropriate for the individual and the context. So you're seeing here effectively choosing and exhibiting the leadership behavior. So we're going to talk a little bit later on about something that you might have heard of called leadership fitness, which is basically having a flexible style of leadership. Because if you're doing a human centered approach, you're dealing with different people, you're dealing with different personalities. So you do have to have a little bit of flexibility in your style of leadership. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And then finally, by increasing people's confidence, sense of well being, and resilience to stress, human centered leadership has the potential to help people adapt more easily and even change their relationship with work for the better. So, not only can this help people feel better about where they work, but this can actually change people's relationships with the organization, with the way that they work, when you have this style of leadership. So now we're going to get into how to be a people-centered leader. And we're going to really kind of go into and break down some of the different elements, especially those that have been outlined by some of my favorite resources that have been developed by the Harvard Business School. So this one is see staff as human. That might sound just so intuitive and like a no brainer. Of course, I see my staff as people. Of course, I see my staff as human, right? But again, all of these things are a little more difficult and take a little more effort than we might think. So seeing staff as human means more than just, we're all people. We all have to respect each other in our organization. There's a few more elements that we want to take in mind as people-centered leaders, right? So the first is identifying human needs. So we have to understand that there are specific needs that everyone might have in our organization. So that could be the need to be heard, the need to be recognized for achievements, the need to be recognized for our potential, the need to belong. Even if you're working virtually, everyone wants to feel connected to some kind of community. So seeing everyone as a human is also recognizing that everybody has specific needs that need to be met within the workplace. And again, these are just a few that we could think about. But then we kind of have to go beyond that step of identifying what these needs are and saying, do we have the capability? Are we actually taking these steps to meet these needs? So, are we doing what we need to do so that people feel heard? Are we recognizing people's achievements and potentials? Are we creating a place where people feel that they belong? And so here are a few considerations within this area. So first, we have to recognize and appreciate the differences that are among the people that we work with, right? So again, everyone is different. Everyone might have slightly different needs. Like think about the idea. One of the leadership and management articles that I've been seeing a lot of lately, and maybe you've been seeing them too, is the idea about how to manage the generation Z, Gen Z, and how that generation is so much different than trying to manage millennials or others, and how you have to take a different approach with them, right? Which I think is a really interesting conversation, but in some ways is true. So the idea of seeing and appreciating differences. Self-awareness, as someone had mentioned earlier, and like what does it take to be a good people-centered approach. You have to understand kind of your own when you might have your own biases, or maybe you are leaning more towards certain needs and ignoring other needs, right? Or things that might be a little easier for you to do, or leaning towards people who might be easier for you to work with. So being self-aware. And also, again, when you're hiring, when you're working with your staff, you do want to think about an inclusive workplace, because the idea that all these different types of personalities and backgrounds can really add different dimensions to where you work, and also just utilizing different people's skills and different people's talents. So, of course, there are challenges to having for this very first element, right, of seeing staff as human, which is you actually have to get to know people and let them get to know you. And if you're just, have one person that reports to you and you two work closely together, that might be very easy to do. But if you're maybe in a senior leadership position, or you have a large staff, or you have staff that's spread across many different floors or across many different buildings, that might be a little bit more difficult. But if you do take a people centered approach to leadership, that is an important element of trying to get to know people and let them get to know you. And like you said, it can be a little bit challenging in certain positions. I just want to list a couple of things that I've implemented in my position as a library director. I try to do monthly meetings with those who don't report directly to me. And those are very short. They can be 15 to 20 minutes, but it is, I say it's their time. It's their time just to talk to me, to tell me anything that's happening. If it doesn't have to be a time if there's no complaints, you can just update me on what you're working on, tell me more about your projects that you're doing. I try to do weekly meetings with the people that work directly with me. That doesn't usually happen, but we work together so much that it's not absolutely necessary, but that's usually the goal. I do have to take some time to walk around each day. Around 3 or 4 o'clock every day, I hit this kind of wall from meetings and looking at my computer. So I do like that's the time I go around and try to see. I try not to bother people and interrupt their work, but that's a good time just to say hi. Creating staff engagement events. We just did our first ever library retreat where I work. So trying to do things that bring people together. And again, the name of the talk today is leaving the door open. That's one of the things that I established when I first got into this position, is that if my door is open, you can come in, you can talk to me. We can, or if it's a longer conversation, we can schedule something. But if my door is open, I'm available. And if it's closed, I'm in a meeting or something, but I have an open door policy. So these are just some of the tips that I do in this situation. Okay, moving on to the next element. And I was so happy that so many people said empathy, because this is such a big part of having a people centered approach to management. Empathy and compassion. And so, how does that work? So, I just want to give some definitions here. Empathy, the action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experience of another, which is different from sympathy. Sympathy is a feeling of sincere concern for someone who is experiencing something difficult. So, empathy involves that actively sharing in the emotional experience. And then we have compassion, which is a sympathetic consciousness of others' distress. So, these, I wanted to get these out there. These are, of course, standard Merriam-Webster dictionary. So, here's a little bit of kind of research about empathy in the workplace that I thought was interesting. Empathy is recognized as a crucial element for building trust and supporting mental health in the workplace. However, research suggests that many leaders struggle to consistently display empathy towards their teams, which is obviously understandable, especially if leaders have a lot on their plates. They have a lot of different things moving on. It might not always be intuitive or easy to always be showing that empathy that is necessary. While 78% of senior leaders acknowledge the importance of empathy, only 47% believe their companies are effectively practicing it. So a gap really persists of between we know that there needs to be more empathy, but there is definitely room for improvement. And then finally, empathy alone is not sufficient for effective leadership. Leaders must take meaningful actions to address employees' concerns and complaints, which is true. So we'll get into that just a little bit. So I want to talk a little bit more about the idea of having empathy and compassion. So really, it's recognizing, understanding, and acknowledging the feelings and needs of your staff. And so, why is this important during periods? It can really assist in things like change and transition. So if you kind of have this empathy, if you're understanding what's happening with your staff, you can better facilitate things that might cause stress. You can anticipate things that might cause stress, that might cause anxiety for your staff, and find ways to work with them through that. And it could be something, it could be a small change, such as like people moving different of offices. It could be a large change, like a institutional wide a policy, but it can really assist with that when you have empathy. The key to building a trusting relationship. So if people are feeling heard, if people are knowing that you are listening, understanding your feelings, then that can build trust. And building trust again can lead to better communication, a better open exchange of ideas. Listening and hearing versus taking action. So the idea of when is it appropriate for someone to listen? When is it appropriate for us to take action? Because sometimes all you need to do is hear people. You need to understand what their feelings are. You need to understand their concerns and talk about their fears. And then sometimes it's really appropriate to say, okay, I hear what you're saying, and we're going to try to help you or help the organization really get through this. And then finally, drawing the line. When we talk about empathy and compassion, there's always the line in terms of management or leaders. that we can't be therapists, we can't we can't address all of the problems or the fears that people are having, so we also have to kind of be mindful and take care of ourselves, and that's an important part of it too. Yeah, and I think that that's a really interesting definition that was just put in the chat, that exercise, that management is the exercise of supervision, control, authority, and power, which it probably is the standard definition. Hopefully, by using some of these tips, it can take out some of that kind of harshness that we feel in terms of certain styles of leadership. So thanks for putting that in there. So I want to move on to make sure I get through everything. So I want to talk a little bit about organizational purpose and personal mission. So, one of the things that's really interesting about being in a position of leadership, about being in a position, being a manager position, is that even if you're in the lower middle management, you're always in the middle, right? You're always trying to balance the needs and the stakeholders for the institution, and also balancing the needs of your staff and the fulfillment of your staff, right? And so, how do we successfully manage both, right? And one way to do that is to align the individual's personal mission and values with the organizational mission and values, right? So, helping the staff identify in some way with the goals of the organization, with the values of the organization. And this can be done in many different ways. So, identifying the ways that staff can contribute to the organization's mission. So, really explaining why the work that people are doing is really important, why it furthers the mission, why it makes this a successful workplace. So, making people feel that their work is meaningful, not just making them feel that it's meaningful, showing them that it is meaningful, telling people that what they're doing is helping us to be a really great organization. And this requires a lot of openness and flexibility, because that can look different in many different scenarios, right? So people may have different ideas in their ways. So you want to be open to that. But being able to align someone's personal mission, personal values with the organizational mission and values can increase the sense of fulfillment and meaningfulness in their work, which leads to better communication and better productivity, and also just a better work environment for everyone who's there. So this is a really important one. And I think, all of us who have been in really stressful, maybe toxic work environments and work situations have had to deal with the idea of psychological safety, and then, of course, intellectual honesty. So let's talk a little bit about this. So, psychological safety means people feel accepted and comfortable sharing concerns without fear of embarrassment or retribution. And when I was talking a little bit earlier about that very first nonprofit that I worked in when I was very young, there was definitely no feeling of psychological safety. I had no idea kind of what type of environment that I was going to be walking into every day. I didn't even know who was going to be there every day. I didn't know who would be fired. I didn't know who would still be there. I didn't know what time people were going to come in. And I definitely did not feel that I could speak up and talk about those issues. So again, when people don't have that feeling of safety, of psychological safety, either they leave or they stay, but they don't feel comfortable. They can't contribute. They can't do the work that they want to do. They're not happy or fulfilled in their workplace. So the idea of psychological safety, of people feeling accepted and comfortable and being able to share concerns without fear, is incredibly important. And also the idea of intellectual honesty, right? So having a workplace where there's psychological safety doesn't mean that we can't communicate certain issues, doesn't mean that we can't debate or have disagreements or issues without fear of alienating or diminishing the feelings of others. So there's this balance here that we have to create. We have to be intellectually honest. So we have to be truthful. We have to be transparent with people, but we also want to create a place where people can talk, have conversations back and forth, can express their feelings without fear. So there's these balance of these really two important elements to have a human-centered or centered approach to leadership or management. And I know they're two different things, but they apply to both. So you have to have this balance between psychological safety and intellectual honesty. And again, this balance allows for a lot of different things for your workplace, but it encourages the idea of mental health, of people feeling safe and feeling good about coming to work, but it also allows for better problem solving because people can debate and to talk about different ideas. And it also encourages just beyond that, when you have this open conversation, this feeling of psychological safety and intellectual honesty, it encourages things like innovation because people aren't afraid to share new ideas, even if they're pie in the sky ideas and enthusiasm. So having this can be really beneficial, not only to the staff, but to the organization as well. Moving on to efforts and outcomes. So in terms of management styles, of course, there's all different kind. No one really wants to have or be a micromanager. Um, Hopefully, you don't want to be a micromanager. Whenever I am managing a new team, I always say, it's not a good thing if I have to micromanage because that means that I'm doing your work and I'm also doing my work, right? And so, but we don't want to be completely hands off because, like I said before, people still want guidance. People still want recognition of their potential, recognition of their achievements. They want to they want to have the sense of collaboration. So again, it's being really involved and invested in the efforts that people are taking in their work and the outcomes that people have in their work. So it's another balancing act, and again, we'll talk about leadership fitness, balancing act between not having this micromanagement, but not having this complete hands-off approach. So having the efforts and the outcomes. And then there's the recognition of contributions, right? And so again, going back to meeting the needs, meeting the human needs, right? So we're invested in efforts and outcomes. That means that you recognize and you give praise, you give feedback for people's not just the end products or the great big things that you're doing, but even the small kind of contributions and wins that people have. And of course, beyond that, we're valuing people's ideas, we're valuing people's efforts, we're showing a sincere interest in the work that people are doing. And this is one of the ways that I feel like we can really get to learn what people's work is and where they are beyond micromanagement. It's just interest, just showing the interest in the people's work. And then there's the ability to evaluate work and outcomes. So a big part of management, a big part of supervision is providing feedback, is doing things like having annual reviews and being able to do that successfully in a way, again, that encourages psychological safety, intellectual honesty, but also, recognizing and evaluating and being very aware of people's efforts and outcomes. Okay, I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but this is just the tip of the iceberg, and these are elements that you can continue to explore and learn on your own. So moving on to learning and development. This is something that has been really just important to me in general, because one of the ways that I've always kind of approached management, and this isn't probably sometimes in the best way, but I always think about when I'm in situations how I feel like things could be done a little bit better, right? And one of the things that I find has always been really helpful to me as I grew in my career is supporting my learning, supporting my professional development, supporting my expertise in the field. And a lot of people feel like when you're invested in their success, when you're invested in their in increasing their skill level, when you're invested in them just being good at what they do, then that really kind of assist in again having that connection to how their work is meaningful, how their work is meaningful not just for them, but just for the organization, for their team, collaboratively, but also, you're just thinking about in the future, wherever you are, if your staff leave, you always want people in the next place to say, wow, that organization really, really produces great staff members. Those produce those are great libraries librarians already always come into that organization. So it's carrying on your a bit your legacy of how you manage people, but also when you produce really great people, when you invest in your staff is probably a better way to say it, then you good people leave, but then good people want to come as well. So you're kind of really helping assist the future legacy of your organization as well. So I try to, when you think of professional development and providing support and learning opportunities, a lot of that can be difficult practically for many different organizations because a lot of time these things do cost money, and you might not have a budget to send people to conferences, a budget to pay for expensive classes or expensive workshops or anything like that. But just giving people the opportunities to say yes, we believe is very important for you. If you want to take these free classes, or if you want to take a day to go to that kind of that free conference or something, we see that it's important that you continue to be a part of the profession, to contribute to the field, and to learn. And also, I think it is very important for my team that we incorporate continuing education as individually. So for my managers who manage other people, I do ask them to continue to learn and improve on their management skills, because that's something that everyone can do. We are fortunate in my organization to have access to resources like LinkedIn Learning, but if you don't have those type of resources, there are articles and websites and really wonderful books that you can share with your staff. But I feel like it's also important to show that management and other skills are important for your staff. And so again, it's invested in their success in all situations. So as we get a little close to the end here, so we'll have some time for questions. I do want to talk a little bit about taking the next steps. So we've gone over what is considered the main elements of people-centered or human-centered leadership. And so, what are some extra steps that can be taken to continue to build your skills in this area, or if you decide that this is a great style for you, how can you improve on that? So I mentioned leadership fitness earlier, and there could probably be a whole other webinar on leadership fitness. But leadership fitness, it's kind of compared in many ways. I don't know if anyone here has ever done CrossFit before, is really into CrossFit. I've taken one CrossFit class in my life, and that was enough. But the theory of CrossFit is that from my understanding, is that it prepares you to be in any kind of physical situation. So whether you want to swim 25 miles, if you want to run a marathon, if you want to play basketball, you are physically conditioned to be in all of those situations. And leadership fitness is a way like that as well, that you have a type of leadership style that is really flexible because you kind of recognize the complexities of a people-centered approach to management. That when you are putting people first as your leadership style, as your management style, that you do have to be really flexible because everyone is different, and everyone has different needs, as we've discussed. So again, Harvard defines leadership fitness through four elements: balance, strength, flexibility, and endurance. We talked a lot about the different elements of balance that are needed to have this approach. Again, we talked about psychological safety, intellectual honesty. We talked about efforts and outcomes. We have to have strength. So there still is an element of guidance, of leadership, flexibility of being able to work with different people who might be in different stages of the career, of their life, dealing with psychological safety, and of course, endurance. This is something that can can take a lot out of you. So recognizing your own capacity and limitations. And so again, there's a lot of really great research and documentation on leadership fitness if you're interested in learning more about that. As someone wrote again, building your self awareness. So, again, recognizing your unique strengths and limitations. And what I like to say is, if you sometimes on the surface, if you think about a people-centered approach or a human-centered approach, however you like to say it, you think, okay, so do I have to be this like extroverted people person and be able to talk and to be on and have these kind of deep felt conversations with everyone all the time? Well, that's not the case because I am definitely an introvert, but you understand, how to make it work within your own limitations, within your own personal style. Again, that's also part of kind of building emotional intelligence and understanding that with the rest of your staff. And again, recognizing your own biases and being your authentic self. So again, understanding that you don't have to change your personality, you don't have to push yourself beyond your limitations to practice in a people centered style of leadership. So there, again, I always say, as we're librarians, we're great researchers. Again, there are really wonderful resources out there for different personalities and different styles of management. I recently read a book, since we were sharing books, called and now I just sorry, I had in my head, I will think of it before the end of the webinar, but it is about leading as an introvert. And if anyone can think of what that book might be and want to put it in the chat, I think it's The Art of Quiet Influence. Yes, I knew I would think of it. So The Art of Quiet Influence is about leading as an introvert. So there's different resources that you can use. And then, of course, never stop learning. One thing I do keep telling people, and I've said it a million times here, is that the phrase that I've heard is leadership is the heart and management is the head. You can build skills to be a better manager. You can help those who manage your organization be better managers if you see the potential in them. There are whole areas of studies dedicated to this. There's wonderful resources and books and things like LinkedIn Learning classes and another type of resources. But this is something that people can get better at. And if you see the potential in people, these are things worth investing in, and then with yourself as well. So continue to learn and build your skills of leadership, which will carry you through any situation. And so, again, just to kind of go back and keeping all of these ideas that I just discussed in mind, and why the studies have shown that this is a successful approach to leadership, but why I also believe that this is a successful approach. Some of the things, such as it improves retention. When I asked you all if you had ever left a job because of poor management or poor management culture, there were so many people who said yes, right? Because no one wants to be in that type of situation where you don't feel safe, where you don't want to go to work every day and you have fear and anxiety about it. So when you have this type of style and you're invested in people, it definitely improves the retention rate. It assists employees to better handle organization changes and transitions. Again, as we've talked about that before, that's a big part of leadership, is guiding people through the different changes and transitions that will happen within the workplace. And this can help to assist people to handle that better, to contribute to those events in a different way. It increases productivity and collaboration because, again, people feel safe to express their ideas. They feel that their work is meaningful. They feel fulfillment. They have connected the meaningfulness in their work to the organization's goals. So increases productivity, provides a comfortable and enjoyable work environment because, again, people feel that they can talk to each other, they can talk to the leadership, they can contribute ideas, they can be innovative, that they can learn and continue to grow their skills, and that they feel safe, which is so important. It allows for flexible problem solving. And again, it's adaptable for managing different personality types. The example I gave before was Gen Z, and how people are thinking that a lot of scholarship is coming around that now. But this allows you to be flexible in your leadership style. And of course, your staff are more engaged and invested because you're more engaged and invested. And so that is my kind of brief overview. I know that these slides will be shared, but here are some really great resources. I think Harvard has done some really great research on this, and a few others, Forbes, and some other resources. But I hope that you all have enjoyed this. Hopefully, you've gotten something from this presentation today. I'd love to hear more from you. And I don't know if we have time for questions, but again, thank you all so much for being so engaged, for participating, and for being here in our presentation today.